He smuggled drugs inside the coffins of dead American soldiers, yet claimed he did it for the culture. Frank Lucas wasn't just another kingpin. He was a legend built on blood, loyalty, and bold lies. Today, we're diving deep into the real story of Frank Lucas, the man who built a heroin empire in Harlem, took down the Italian mafia, and ended up working with the very feds he once dodged. The truth? It's way messier than Hollywood ever showed. What would you do if the one man who mentored you, fed you, clothed you, protected you, was murdered by the same system you are now feeding drugs into? Think about that as we peel back the layers of Frank Lucas. Frank Lucas wasn't born in Harlem. He was born in LaGrange, North Carolina in 1930, dirt poor and black in the Jim Crow South. He claimed the KKK killed his cousin for looking at a white woman. Whether true or myth, that trauma stayed with him. At 15, after a robbery gone wrong, Lucas hopped a Greyhound bus to New York and never looked back. He arrived with nothing but a sharp mind and a survival instinct that wouldn't quit. He didn't come to Harlem just to live. He came to own it. The streets became his classroom. Hustling became his degree. And violence? That was just business. Never underestimate a man who's got nothing to lose and everything to prove. In Harlem, timing is everything, and Lucas got lucky. He met Bumpy Johnson, the black godfather of Harlem, a man who ran the streets with old-school finesse and mafia-level power. Frank didn't just hustle for Bumpy, he studied him. How he moved, how he negotiated, how he dealt with betrayal. Bumpy taught Lucas more than crime. He taught him how to run an enterprise. Loyalty was currency. Respect was everything. And Frank soaked it up like gospel. Bumpy didn't need muscle. He needed a mind. And Lucas delivered. When Bumpy died in 1968, Lucas didn't just mourn, he mobilized. He saw Harlem as unclaimed territory. Great hustlers don't wait for power. They step in when the throne is empty. After Bumpy's death, Frank Lucas made a move that even the mafia wouldn't dare. He cut out every middleman in the heroin pipeline. Instead of buying from the Italians, he flew to Southeast Asia and struck a deal directly with the Golden Triangle. Pure heroin, unstepped on, 98% pure, dirt cheap. He smuggled it in through U.S. military planes, sometimes inside furniture, sometimes in coffins. Risky? Absolutely. But the margins were insane. He wasn't just a gangster. He was a global supplier. He called it blue magic and branded it like Coca-Cola. Addicts wanted the real thing, and dealers lined up to buy wholesale. In business or in the streets, the boldest move wins, if you survive it. Here's the part that made headlines and still turned stomachs. Lucas allegedly smuggled drugs inside the coffins of U.S. soldiers returning from Vietnam. He swore it wasn't inside the bodies, just hidden beneath them in false compartments. Still, the optics were horrific. Drugs riding home with the dead? That's war profiteering on a demonic level. He denied it later, but multiple sources, including his own cousin, confirmed the strategy. It was ruthless, brilliant, and deeply immoral. The military was corrupt. Customs was lazy, and Frank exploited it all. The drug game rewards results, not ethics, and Lucas played to win. Most drug dealers sell drugs. Frank Lucas sold a brand. Blue Magic wasn't just potent. It was packaged, marketed, and protected like a product at Macy's. He gave his drugs a name, a stamp, a standard. If you cut it, you died. If you stole it, you vanished. People trusted Blue Magic more than they trusted the local pharmacy. He brought corporate structure to the dope game, and Harlem couldn't get enough. With soldiers smuggling the product and loyal lieutenants distributing it, Lucas made over $1 million a day. That's not gangster, that's CEO money. The streets don't care about your background, only your product and your power. While other dealers ruled with fear, Lucas ruled with structure. He didn't just sell heroin, he built an organization. Frank modeled his empire after General Motors. There were supply chains, regional managers, quality control, and territory protection. His crew wore suits, carried briefcases, and showed up on time. It wasn't a gang, it was a corporation. Every dollar was tracked. Every product was pure. He even gave his lieutenants bonuses. That's why Blue Magic ran smoother than any mafia pipeline in Harlem. In the streets or the boardroom, systems beat chaos, and Frank knew it. Frank Lucas didn't hide his success, he wore it. Custom suits, diamonds, Bentleys, and fur coats. He bought a $125,000 chinchilla coat and matching $40,000 hat to sit front row at the Ali Frazier fight at Madison Square Garden. That move caught the eye of law enforcement and sealed his downfall. His wealth wasn't quiet, it roared. He owned properties across the country, from New Jersey to North Carolina, and stashed millions in offshore accounts. But in a game where flash attracts heat, the mink coat did more damage than any rival. Sometimes what gets you noticed gets you caught. By cutting out the Italians, Lucas made powerful enemies. The mafia hated him. Dirty NYPD cops wanted their piece, and even his own people grew jealous. Trust started cracking. Friends became informants. One cousin flipped after being arrested in Thailand. Once his foundation became his biggest vulnerability. When the money stacks up, so do the nods in your back. Frank once said, "The loudest one in the room is the weakest one in the room." Ironically, his own empire was starting to shout. In the game of power, your biggest threat might be your own reflection. Enter Richie Roberts, a straight-laced New Jersey narcotics detective, rare for being honest when most of his colleagues were corrupt. While other cops were taking bribes, Richie was building a case. When his team found nearly $1 million in unmarked bills and turned it in, people thought he was insane. But Lucas had finally found an opponent who couldn't be bought. Richie and his task force watched Frank's every move. They trailed his lieutenants. They tapped phones. They built the blueprint of Lucas's empire piece by piece. Real threats aren't loud. They're methodical, patient, and always watching. In 1975, facing a 70-year sentence, Lucas made a move nobody saw coming. He cooperated. He flipped. Gave up cops. Gave up competitors. Gave up the very system he thrived in. His testimony helped convict over 100 law enforcement officers and drug dealers. The courtroom went silent when names were read. Frank didn't just burn bridges, he lit up the whole highway. Some called him a hero, others a traitor. But Lucas claimed he did it because they were all dirty anyway. Loyalty sounds noble until survival becomes the louder voice. Frank bragged that his cooperation led to the arrest and conviction of over 100 dirty cops. It made headlines. It made him infamous. But the truth? The numbers are muddy. Official records confirm dozens of convictions. Cops, feds, dealers, but not nearly 100. Some say he exaggerated. Others say he told less than he could have. The line between snitch and whistleblower blurred fast. But one thing was clear. Frank helped shine a light on massive corruption inside the NYPD and federal agencies. In a world built on silence, sometimes the loudest confession starts a revolution. Once the king of Harlem, Frank Lucas now sat behind bars. His empire crumbled. His wealth vanished. He was sentenced to 70 years, but only served 5, thanks to his cooperation. Upon release, he tried to rebuild, but the game had changed. Old friends were gone. Harlem was different. The streets no longer whispered his name. Power in the streets is temporary. Prison time is permanent. He got arrested again in the 80s for trying to restart his operation. This time, he served 7 more years. The comeback is never as strong when the world's already moved on. Frank Lucas carried the snitch label for decades. Some praised him for taking down corrupt cops. Others spit on his name. Even his former allies, like Nicky Barnes, blasted him. Ironically, Barnes himself later flipped and testified too. In the underworld, snitching is the ultimate betrayal, but survival often rewrites the rules. Lucas called it strategy. His enemies called it weakness. He once said, "You only need to be loyal to those who are loyal to you." That wasn't a code, it was a loophole. In the streets, loyalty is currency, but betrayal is inflation. When American Gangster hit theaters in 2007, Denzel Washington turned Frank Lucas into an icon. Smooth, calculating, charismatic, it was a Hollywood dream. But the real story? Messier, dirtier, less slick. Lucas himself admitted the movie took major liberties. Bumpy wasn't his lifelong mentor. His wife didn't shoot anyone. And Richie Roberts? They weren't exactly best friends. Hollywood gave Frank a facelift, and the world bought the image. Still, the film sparked curiosity. Interviews, documentaries, debates. It revived his brand and let him control the narrative one last time. The truth might be blurry, but legend always finds a camera. Ask 5 people in Harlem who Frank Lucas was, and you'll get 5 answers. A hero, a villain, A genius, a rat, a destroyer. Some say he gave back to the community. Others say he poisoned it. He paid for funerals. He funded holidays. But he also flooded the streets with dope that killed thousands. His legacy is a mirror, and what you see depends on where you stand. To some, he's proof that black men can rise to the top, even in a dirty gang. To others, he's a symbol of everything that went wrong. Power writes history, but truth rewrites legacy. After serving time twice, Frank Lucas didn't return to the streets with Kingpin ambition. He was older, slower, and Harlem had changed. Gentrification replaced his empire with coffee shops and condos. Lucas gave interviews, went on talk shows, and even worked with nonprofits, trying to reshape his image. But the shadow of blue magic never left. He walked with a cane. His fortune was gone. His legend remained, but the man behind it faded quietly. He died in 2019 at 88, more remembered for what he was than what he became. You can escape the game, but the game never forgets your name. Frank Lucas didn't just make money, he changed the blueprint. He globalized the hustle, introduced brand loyalty, outsmarted the mafia, and exposed the rot within the justice system. His empire proved that intelligence, not just muscle, could rule the underworld. He was a pioneer in a deadly business. Today's cartels, scammers, and cybercriminals all use some form of what Lucas created: direct supply lines, cut costs, and powerful branding. He made crime corporate. His hustle became a blueprint, even for the next generation of villains. So who was Frank Lucas really? A ruthless heroin dealer who destroyed lives. A black pioneer who beat the mob at their own game. A sellout who snitched when the heat turned up. Or all of the above. His legacy lives in a gray area where power, pain, and perception collide. Lucas once said, "The loudest one in the room is the weakest one." But in the end, his story echoed louder than most. Love him or hate him, you can't ignore him. History remembers the bold, but it never forgets the cost. Frank Lucas's story is more than a gangster tale. It's a lens into America's deepest contradictions: race, power, poverty, corruption, and ambition. He didn't play by the rules because the rules were never made for men like him. In one lifetime, he built an empire, made history, and became a cautionary tale wrapped in mink and myth. If you're into the untold truths of the underworld, subscribe and hit that bell. Up next, the one gangster who scared both the mafia and the government. You won't want to miss it.